can't either.
You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hey folks, Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are only things that makes official. Welcome to Big Show. As always, we're the show that provides you with the most amazing authors, minds, and people on the journeys of life that share with you their stories and ways to improve the quality of your life. I'm just an idiot host, so if it wasn't for our guest, this show wouldn't be as smart as it is with our brilliant guests. So be sure to support the show. We're the oldest living podcast now that still publishes 1 to 2 shows a day. No one else is doing that in our age range. So go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity. Today, an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his book called We Believe: Membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, A Christian Conversation by Phillip M. Graehl. We're going to get into him, talk about his interests and some of the insights that he put into his book. He is a retired orthopedic surgeon living in Texas with his wife of 38 years and their son. Raised in a non-religious household, he began studying the Bible at age 38 after feeling unfulfilled despite achieving many of his life's goals. His search led him to discover Jesus Christ as the Savior and Redeemer, and eventually explore his family's religious roots in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Through studying the Book of Mormon and his faith, he found a deeper understanding of life, renewed hope, and lasting happiness. Welcome to the show, Phillip. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for the invitation to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you for coming. We're honored to have you. Give us .com's websites, where we want people to find out more about you.
Well, I have a book website, philipmgrailbooks.com. You can also find the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, those type of platforms. That's about it right now.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book?
Well, basically, it is sort of a olive branch handout to the world of Christianity to build bridges of understanding between Christian faiths. The history of Christianity and its reaction to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been one that's been, I'd say one of contention. And I don't think that should necessarily be the case. I think peoples that are purporting to want to live the life of a discipleship in Jesus Christ should treat each other like he recommended we do. And I find that we don't always do that. Then that comes from both sides of the aisle. So it's just a way for me to try to dispel some of the erroneous information that Christians use to criticize the church. Not that there aren't differences between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and other Christian denominations, but they certainly aren't of the level, I don't think, that should keep us from being able to talk to each other.
There you go. And I've been a witness to those contentious. There was another one that I had that was a little bit better, but a little bit, not nice. But when I lived in Utah 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, how long, 2004, before that. So yeah, 20 years ago, I worked at one point with a company that they sold edited films that had been, they took out all the sex, violence, swear words, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And much to the chagrin of Hollywood, because like you're messing with art, and I think eventually the FCC ended up shutting him down over some false stuff and bad things they were doing. But when I worked with him. He had a big organization. They would edit these movies and then resell them and stuff. And so they would sell them to like churches, and usually they would target like churches, and then they would get the churches to open up their membership, and then they would sell these movies to them. And we would get we started getting newsletters from the Southern Baptists and other Christians around the nation. They put us on their list, and then I would talk to a lot of them, and it was wild because I'd been living from 2004. I came when I was 12 or 13, and so I was here about 20 years, I think, before I moved out. And they would say stuff to me that was just beyond comprehension. They'd be like, "So what are the Mormons like walking around with their black capes and their horns? What's
Yeah.
seeing them in the streets?" And you're like, what drugs are you on, man? Like, of course, back then you couldn't check what an average street in Utah looked like with Google Maps yet.
No,
But
no.
the stuff they would come up with about Mormons, and you're like, no, you would try and correct them. You'd be like, no, I walk around downtown all day long. They don't wear horns. They don't wear capes or black or, I mean, some sort of get up like Matrix or something. And
Yeah.
you're like, no, there's not. They just kind of do their thing. And so, yeah, it was wild. Some of the crazy stuff they would say to me. And I'd be like, yeah, that's not true. They're just human beings walking around, man. I was like, I don't know where you're getting
Yeah.
this information. And I
But there
imagine that
again,
was 20 years ago. It's
there,
probably worse or the same. I don't know.
there are some things in the church's history that cause even people in the church to kind of scratch their head a little bit. And so there are some things that, when taken out of context, look a little bit worse than they really are.
Mhm.
But in my research in writing the book, I didn't get all the answers I was looking for in regards to
Oh,
those things. So
there you go. Well, what were some things? Were there any things that you found that surprised you in the volume of what you wrote in your research, or things that maybe you thought you really had tried to help other Christians understand Mormons and what they're up to? What were some of the maybe standouts that you came across? I had the horns. That was always the weirdest shit. Like,
well, the main thing I think that is important to point out to all Christians, and I think there's other denominations which who suffer perhaps not as bad as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, but still are seen as on the fringe of Christianity. But if you look at the basic doctrine that we believe that Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God, that He came to this earth and taught us His gospel and atoned for our sins and was crucified and resurrected, um, and He is our Savior and Redeemer. Those things I think we can all Christians can agree on, and we're no
mhm,
different in that regard than any other Christian denomination.
yeah, you spent a lot of time researching this. Why do you think it is they come up with really weird stuff like that? I mean, it's one thing if you want to say, well, we don't like Mormons. They do something. This one Mormon guy did something bad, right? But to, I mean, to just label people with like they're walking around with horns all day in public downtown, you're like, what the? Like, just coming up with that, I would initially say, okay, that sounds a little too far fetched. I mean, we would see pictures by now. We had photographs, 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people hear things from the pulpits of their own
Yeah,
churches
yeah. There you go.
that are not well thought out, or
Mm,
they're just parroting things that have been said for the last 200 years about the church. That
mm,
was the other thing I hoped to get people who might be interested in just something about the church. Are all these things that I've heard, are they really true?
yeah.
So there are three big historical things in the church that people do question quite a lot. One is the fact that during a time in the church, plural marriage was practiced,
Hmm.
and or polygamy.
Hmm.
And so, in looking into that, I found that kind of an interesting thing, because even in the Book of Mormon it says that men shall have only one wife, but it does say at the same time, if the Lord decides to build up a people unto Himself, then He will at times allow for plural marriage, which He did with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
Yeah,
and
I was
so
going to say it's in the Bible, right?
yeah.
You'd think with
So
Christianity, it'd be like, well, it's in the Bible, so
well, the other thing is that it was very, if you read the Revelation that brought it to the forefront, the prophet of the church had to approve such marriages. The people involved had to give consent, that is, both the husband
it's
and
a
the
good thing.
wife or wives. Um, and then, depending on who you or how you try to categorize statistically how many people participated in a plural marriage, if you say, oh, what percentage of the men in the church participated, it was only 2 to 5%. But if you talked about the number of families or the number of persons that were involved in plural marriage relationships, the number goes up quite a ways. So that's something that you really have to look at. It kind of gives you an uneasy feeling when you consider that there's times when God will allow that, because most of us, it doesn't come natural to want to do that. Then the other thing was blacks in the priesthood. There was a time in the church when African Americans were not allowed to hold the priesthood or receive temple ordinances. Now, that wasn't from the beginning. The church was organized in 1830, and blacks were allowed to participate in the priesthood and in temple ordinances until 1852, and that's when Brigham Young was the prophet of the church.
Ah,
In in researching this, I could never find an exact reason why this was implemented. There are some people who speculate it was because of um, political reasons. Um,
did Brigham
the,
Young
the
change
Brigham
the
Young.
rules?
Well, yeah, he changed the rules, but then he said this is only going to be for a time, and then these privileges will be restored.
Hmm.
Um, and it didn't take. It was only people of uh, black people of African descent,
Hmm.
Polynesian people from India, those kind of. They weren't included in this, so none of it really makes all that much sense to me. Um, and I could find, of course, no scriptural backing for it, because the scriptures say that God is no respecter of persons, male, female, bond or free, black or white, Jew or Gentile. So it really sits as kind of an enigma to me, even still.
Huh.
Um,
Now, did you
and
ever
that,
get a hold of the original copies or the earlier copies of the Book of Mormon? Because most of the Book of Mormon has been scrubbed, and it was scrubbed to the racist stuff too.
yeah, the no, there's still in the Book of Mormon there talks about when there was two groups of people that came to the Western Hemisphere, or one group of people that split into two that came to the Western Hemisphere, and
Yeah.
the wicked ones, we'll call them, at least they were the wicked ones to start with. They received a mark. It said a mark of blackness. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's still debate as to whether that was black skin or a black mark that they put on their skin. I have no idea. That's
Yeah.
that part of it. Um, I don't really have an answer what that mark of blackness exactly was. So
my understanding from being in the church was they used it for racism. One of the challenges of Brigham Young is he was an incredible racist. He said some horrific things about them. You found those quotes, didn't you, from him?
I didn't find the quotes, but I do know in looking over the years um, at the supposed reasons why this was implemented uh, in a lot of the church leaders, it sounds it sounds racist.
Yeah, I
Um,
believe the instruction came from Brigham Young. Brigham Young was so toxic they can't ever publish his journals. Like they just can't. And they won't. There's a lot of journals they won't publish either. But between that, the black folks back then, and the Indians, of course, the Meadows Massacre and stuff like that. That was, Brigham Young called the ball on that and sent them after him. So it was a big thing back then. I mean, I was in the church when Spencer W. Kimball made this epiphany announcement as they were opening African missions that all blacks could have the priesthood now.
yeah,
Yeah, because they weren't selling well in Africa.
yeah.
When you tell
Well,
people you got to join our church, but no one can be a leader here, it's a little hard.
yeah, there's all kinds of takes on that, and unfortunately, it coincided. It was even after the big civil rights
Mhm.
issues here in this country, and
Yeah,
it almost appeared to some people that it was just a capitulation to what was going on in the world, and that the church was backed into a
yeah,
corner. I don't necessarily feel that way 100%, but I really don't have any um, defensible position
Hmm.
to put forth as to why it was implemented.
Yeah. If you look it up, the timing of the opening of those missions in sending missionaries to South America and South America and Africa, it was because it wasn't selling, because people were like, you want me to join your church, but I can't hold the priesthood, I can't do anything, and I'm told that I'm a second class citizen because of Cain or something. I believe all that originated from, well, it originated from one of the guys in the, maybe it was Nephi, Lehi. No, Lehi was the dad. Nephi was the kid. Wasn't there an evil brother? Anyway, I think they knock it back to Cain and Adam, if I recall correctly.
Well, there's
And
all kinds of stories that,
yeah,
the descendants of Ham, who was
yeah,
one of
yeah,
Noah's sons, and then there's Cain. None of those are really, there again, none of those really hold water. And I think there
yeah.
again, it was people trying to justify their own prejudiced outlook.
Mm.
Um, so,
I mean, Brigham Young said he is quoted as saying some really heinous stuff I wouldn't even repeat about black people. And I don't think he talked to them in a humane way. And so, when you hear the quotes that he made and the way he discussed it, you can only guess what's in that journal. They won't publish. So,
yeah, I've not
um,
I've not seen any of that stuff myself, so I
yeah,
can't really comment on it.
yeah. So, what are some other aspects of the book? You're trying to open a dialogue. You want to have a healthy discussion with people, and you want people to understand, the point of view. And I think you're right. There's a lot of these preachers that are out there. I used to have an uncle who was a Southern Baptist preacher, and some of the stuff that I would hear from him, I'd just be like, "Wow, okay, dude. I've read the Bible. I'm not sure Jesus was that big of an asshole. I told anybody about that big of a jerk." Um, but it's whatever, man. Money's money. You gotta
Yeah.
put fear into people and to control them. And some of the things I saw, like I said, we get all these calls from the South, and they'd be like, "Do the Mormons do this?" And you're like, "Under what?" I mean, what you just said is so dumb. Not you, the person that contacted me. What you
Sure.
just said is so dumb. Like, the fact that you would consider that's a reality is just, I don't know. Like, I think somebody said, I think, don't the Mormons do human sacrifices? And you're like, what? Like that would be legal,
Yeah.
and
Well, and
just
there's
stupid stuff.
yeah, there's all when they went to build the temple here in Dallas in the early '80s. There was a group of Baptists that were all up in arms because they didn't want to have those Mormons bringing corpses in and having them baptized. You know that this the baptism for the dead, they thought was involving dead people as opposed to proxy baptisms for people who had died in the past. So that was an interesting misconception. You know, the bottom line is I guess what it boils down to is if you're going to hate me, I want you to at least know why you hate me and not have it be false information. But you know that's kind of cynical. I really do think that most people um, don't really want to hate people, even though we become quite polarized. We sit down next to each other. If we don't know their political party or their religious bent, we can oftentimes just have the greatest conversations and no one's the wiser.
Mhm.
So, I think that we need to look at each other as the humans that we are. And, you know, if you're interested in delving into somebody's religion, I don't think the first thing you want to do is jump on them when they say something. Oh, you're one of those crazy folks,
Mhm.
because it goes nowhere. Nobody gets changed of their opinion in situations like that. So,
Yeah. Uh, and that was the other thing about polygamy. I mean, polygamy was in the Bible, and polygamy was kind of necessary back then because there were so many men that lost and died and fell by the wayside during that trek. I mean, the trek. I was just up the other day, 2 weekends shooting at photographing at. This is the place monument. I'm not sure
oh
if
yeah,
you're familiar with that, but that's basically
sure,
what they say, Brigham Young stood at this peak, and the view of the valley is incredible. That's why I was up there, and they got these old cool buildings they built. But um, uh, I'm just thinking about that view. It's a hell of a view. It's sad they didn't put apartments or buildings on it. I mean, they have buildings, but you can't really see the view. But and the beautiful sunsets too.
sure,
You can see the Great Lake that I think they thought it was a normal lake, not not a
yeah,
saltwater scurvy lake. But and so it was just amazing what they did. And I drove up the canyon that leads to that, and it's very tiny, very small, and went up to the East Canyon. And I just thought about the small distance that I was doing in 110-degree heat, 105-degree heat, and I was just thinking, man, these people did this with these carts.
yeah.
And here's a fun fact. I don't know if you know this, but if you ever come to Utah and you drive from the top to the bottom or from Salt Lake to Las Vegas, St. George, every one of those cities along that line is a day's travel by cart. So
Mm,
you may see like the distance between there's Beaver and there's what's the other place? There's Beaver and
Beaver City.
Fillmore. Yeah, those might be like a 30-minute drive for you and I. That was a whole day of cart
Yeah,
operation. So if these guys want to go to Vegas and I don't know, party it on, I don't know. They did open they did settle Vegas actually. They built the first fort there. Um
yeah,
and the fort's still there. But when you think about, the distance they would travel just to go do something, and you're just like, my God. I mean, and the heat and, water and bugs and lions and tigers and bears and Indians and all that
yeah.
stuff. It's pretty crazy to think about, you know.
Well, they did quite a job of settling that area,
Yeah. Yeah.
even up into Idaho and down into Arizona as
Yeah.
well.
Brigham Young's like,
And,
we're building the state out. They can't, we're claiming it. But,
yeah,
so many people died. It was, between the Indians, scurvy, snakes, and lions and tigers and bears and stuff. And women do tend to outlive men. They have a better gene pool because they carry the species forward without, if all women die, we're really screwed at the propagation of the species concept. Men can die, but not women. And so you had all these women. I mean, he had like, I think it was 75 wives or something like that. And I
I
remember,
I I don't know that number. I
here,
know
let
it was
me
more
let
than
me see if I
one.
can pull it again. Um, but he had a lot. And I remember he complained to Mark Twain when Mark Twain came through. He's married to 56 wives. I stand corrected there. That's why you should always Google stuff, folks, even if I say it. Um, and 56 wives. He had 57 children by 16 of his wives. All right, I'm not going to figure all that math out, but yeah, he had a lot of wives. But a lot of these were women that couldn't take care of themselves. Their husbands had died. Probably along that 2,000, 3,000 mile journey, whatever it was, from Missouri to Utah. I just sometimes I go out there. I was out in the plains out in Tooele last week, and there's this huge, giant, massive valley, almost this, well, maybe not as big as Salt Lake City, but it's huge. And I just thought of the hand carts out there in the middle of nowhere, just trying to push them. And I think what it got me was, this is the place, um, monument that they have there. They have pictures. They have real built hand carts of what these people travel with, and some of them didn't carry much more than a couple, like 3 kids could sleep on it or something. And then you had to have luggage on that part probably. And I just looked at that and I went, some guy walked this from Missouri to Utah.
Yeah, and sometimes when the husband died, the wife did it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, it was so you kind of had to have polygamy back then. It was kind of a thing, and so I don't know. Nowadays, I do the joke, and I've done this joke for 20 or 30 years because I saw what was coming of the dissolving of the middle class. Thanks, Reagan. I'm still waiting for my trickle down economics check, but I always joke that someday we're going to have an economy and inflation, and the middle class is going to be so downtrodden into the lower class that you're going to, we're a 2 income economy. You're going to need 3 incomes to survive. So we're all going to have to go to polygamy to pay the bills. And we're kind of there now if you've seen gas prices.
yeah. Well, things are getting tough, that's for sure.
I mean, I seriously, I know people, they have 2 double incomes. They make a lot of money, and they're like struggling. I make a lot of money. I don't have a wife and kids, and I'm pretty smart with my money and debt, but it wouldn't take much to put me in the poorhouse if you took some of it away. And so I'm just sitting there looking, well, maybe I should get a wife with a job and money, and maybe get me 2 or 3 wives. I'll just move down to what's that weird alcove at the bottom of Utah where they have the plagues.
Oh, there with the border of Arizona.
Yeah, down there. Get down there.
Yeah, I've
So
forgotten about that.
have you gotten a response yet from any Christian folks yet? I'm not sure how long the book's been out. It's been out since January.
It's been out since January, and but like I say, the marketing has just barely gotten going. So
Okay.
it really hasn't. I've sent some copies to some pastors. One is one. My wife's not a member of the church, and she listens to a pastor out on the East Coast, and
Oh,
I watch with her, and for most of the broadcasts that he has, I say I agree with everything he said. Now there are times when I don't agree, and I do think it's interesting when he makes comments about members of the church that are sort of stereotypical and not really well informed. I sent him a copy, but I haven't heard anything.
yeah. That'll be interesting to see if he reads it. It's a. I don't know why they can't just stand on their own merits and be like, "Hey, our church is great, and let's study the Bible more." In fact, what's funny is I think on Monday or Tuesday of this week, 2 days ago, we had somebody on who was raised in a household where the father or mother was Lutheran and devout. I mean, they have a whole family history of Lutheranism, and then the other spouse, I can't remember which it was, the wife or husband, was devout Christian, or not. I'm sorry, devout Catholic, and they have a
Okay.
huge history. And not only that, they were German Lutheran and Italian Catholic, which,
Okay.
if you understand World War I or World War II, the Germans and Nazis didn't get along well, and they wanted to enter the Vatican property, and so they have a sordid history, really, liking each
Yeah.
other. But I mean, you could have been one of those families. That sounds even worse than.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. That reminds me. I did send a copy to the Pope, but I
Oh,
haven't
did
heard.
you?
But I
There
haven't
you
heard
go.
anything from him. Since
Well,
he's
there you go.
American, I figured he should at
Yeah.
least read it, but I haven't heard back. I sent one after um, Secretary Hegseth came out a few weeks ago and said that the military is no longer going to consider Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints a Christian religion. I sent Donald Trump a copy and said he ought to
Huh?
distribute it to his cabinet and let them
Mm.
maybe reassess. I got a form letter back from President Trump,
Did
but
you? There you go. It's that did shock me, and in fact, I have a lot of Catholic friends. I have a lot of friends from everywhere, and they were surprised too. And there was a bunch of religions they left off the whatever that list they made at the Pentagon, and it was really surprising because I'm like, well, I knew this was a theocracy we're trying to overthrow democracy with, but I didn't realize it was only certain religions are the right ones, according to them, right? And I was like, wow, that's a ballsy move. That's kind of interesting. They pulled that stunt. I know the Mormons got upset, and I can't remember if it's been changed back or not.
well, I think they backpedaled a little bit. But the bottom line is what's contained in somebody's mind very rarely changes. It's like as we've become less prejudiced as a society, I've always felt that people just keep their thoughts to themselves and they're more politically correct than they used to be. I'm not sure that they're any less
Race prejudice.
racist. Yeah, in some cases, I think
Yeah,
that's
a lot of
true.
people hid that, and then it kind of came out in 2015, and you started looking at people like, I didn't know you were incredible racist. You've been playing along this whole time. And they're like, yeah, well, Donald Trump says I can be a racist, so I'm letting it all out. So I would agree with you. People tend to keep it under wraps and hide it. Maybe we should call them closet racists. I think that's probably appropriate. Yeah, I mean it's people got their things. So you've told the story now. What do you think about this thing where the churches come out and said they don't want to be called Mormons, but the problem is they still use it everywhere. In fact, there's still commercials. I think they're running
Well,
with it.
the church itself has basically taken the word Mormon after out of everything, and the reason I think it was is because originally that term Mormon was used as a derogatory term by opponents of the church,
Hmm.
uh, just based on the term the Book of Mormon. So. Yes, the church wants to be known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is a mouthful.
Yeah.
But there really is no such thing as the Mormon Church, and there never
Hmm.
has been. But it became so common in the vernacular, not only of the country but in the church itself, that it's taken a long time and will take a long time to erase that word as a description of a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Maybe I think they were using it maybe as a cudgel against them, where they were saying, "Well, they're not true Christians; they're Mormons, so they're not Christians." That was like a little word
Yeah.
game. And
Well, I think that's where the true name of the church comes in to help substantiate the fact that we are. Um, but there again, I think people are going to have to decide for themselves. And I would rather have them try to decide for themselves than listen to their pastor or their preacher up there on Sunday pounding the pulpit and talking about the satanic horde that are the Mormons and that kind of thing.
it is pretty interesting. I mean, I can vaguely remember all the weird stuff that they would call us up and be like, "So what's it like?" And you're like, "Dude, like." Some of the stuff they've come up with just so imaginative. You're just like, what world are you living in, man? Because I mean, people don't walk around in America like that. And you it was just always weird. And but they would hear it from different places, so it's a good thing you're laying that foundation out there for people. And do you address the big kerfuffle they got in where they were hiding their the huge hedge funds they built with tithing money, and they were hiding it not only from their members but the IRS, and they got caught? Do you step into that at all?
I've so here's my take on that. The whistleblower on that, to me, was a guy who thought that the funds ought to be used in a different manner. that is, and typically more in the present, helping poor and needy, even though the church does spend quite a bit of money in all those kind of things. Um, but what people have to realize is that for those of us who believe, we also believe that there's something coming up in the not too distant future, the second coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. And we know that the times leading up to that are going to get pretty difficult for everybody,
Hmm.
including. And so I think the church has to have reserves in anticipation of the needs that are going to be coming forth. So
Hmm.
I wasn't really up on the nitty gritty of what they thought, what SEC regulations or that kind of thing were breached. I just found it kind of interesting that some guy could think that he knew better how to distribute the funds than the church was doing. And I think he was just a little short sighted. But anyway, it's one of those things that it tried the faith of some members,
Hmm.
like a lot of things do. I remember I was in college and at the University of Utah, and these letters came out that supposedly had been written by Joseph Smith that were basically
Fake.
somehow fake, or that said the church,
Yeah. So they were. Yeah.
implied the church wasn't what they said it was, and then
Hmm.
they found out that they were all fake. So people get trials of their faith all the time, and it's something we all have to work through.
Yeah. That was a
You
famous case where the guy, I think he tried to blow some people up or blew some people up because he was trying to
can't
hide
remember.
his him forging the documents. And
Yeah,
I think he went to jail. I think it was a
yeah,
whole big thing back then. But no, I think the two biggest elements of that was the concern for the fact that they admitted they hid it because they were worried that their tithing income would fall off. So they hid it from their members.
hmm,
The other thing is, it was a clear criminal violation of the IRS code, and they've pled guilty to that and paid the reparations. So it was a big deal,
yeah.
and for the people I know that are paying into that church, believing that money goes to something good. Um, and I mean, I don't know where they're at. They're probably the fifth largest landholder in the United States or sixth largest landholder. You're talking, the trillions in funds. I mean, they could really quit accepting tithing right now, and they could live off the income of everything they've built and invested in. Um,
But then the members wouldn't have the blessings that are attendant with paying tithing. So
yeah,
that's the other side of that coin.
that's what I always tell people who pay me monthly. You wouldn't have the blessing of paying me monthly. Jokes. And so as we go out, give people a final pitch out to pick up your book and get to know you better.coms, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. Well, I'd be happy for people who even don't know about the church, but think that they've heard some weird things and maybe would like to find out about it from a source that I'm going to say is unbiased. I'm not somebody that works for the church, is paid by the church, and I sort of came across my involvement in a very special way that happened to me. Um, that
You
read the
found the
book.
church late in life too. You weren't born into it. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you,
I
but
was,
I think that's a
well,
salient
I
point.
was, my family was, it's an interesting story too, because my parents were married in the Salt Lake Temple, but I never saw them
Oh,
enter a church when I was on the earth. So
oh,
they
really?
were basically, here's the deal. They were born in the late 20s,
Hmm.
and back in those days, everything social, your athletics, your dances, I mean, everything was church.
Hmm.
So you sort of got carried along in the church, even if you didn't have a testimony of the gospel, because that's just, if you wanted to go to a dance, it was at the church on Saturday
Yeah,
night. If you wanted to
yeah.
play softball, it was at the church field. And so I think a lot of people in that era just sort of got carried along, but really didn't invest in it to gain a testimony or so forth. So, yeah, my folks fell away, and
Hmm.
it's just one of those things. And so I knew a little bit about the church, but I didn't know much. But the one thing is, I had a lot of cousins who were active in the church, and I'm thinking, well, these guys seem like pretty good guys to me. I'm not sure why people are so down on members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So anyway, when I finally read the Bible, I said, okay, well, I probably owe it to my precursors to at least read the Book of Mormon and see what I think. So I did, and I was convinced. So
there you go. There you go. If you can, try and find the early copies before the PR agents got to them. If I recall rightly, the N-word's in there quite a bit. Negro. And that got scrubbed. It's been scrubbed. Over 4,000 things have been edited in it. So one of the best things I ever did was I got a hold of and it turns out my mom had them. She had old 1800s, early 1900s, old 1800s church history books. And back then they didn't PR it. They just went, yeah, that's the way we did it. So what? And it'll really open your eyes to a lot of things. So check those out. I'd recommend everybody check those books out as well. Technically the Word of God is not supposed to be edited. In fact, I believe Joseph Smith states that, but it's been heavily redacted and edited. But yeah, it's important to question faith. It's important to learn about one's faith. It's important to educate. It's important to discuss and debate. There's so much of it now. I mean, the church's biggest issue has been people have had access to the internet, and they can study and they can do data and they can pull different things. And so, people can either find that it supports their religion, but I would say it's probably one of the most misunderstood religions. I have family that's in the Mormon church. And some of the things that people have come up to me about Mormons, I'm just like, dude, what the hell, man? like this, what you came up with is so dumb. I don't.
Yeah.
People walking around in black capes and horns. Like, how would that be great during the summer? Anyway, it's crazy, man. And they don't, folks. I was downtown last week. There you go. So they haven't even started yet or something. I don't know what the joke is there. Well, thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it, Phillip.
My pleasure, and I really appreciate the invitation.
There you go. Thanks, Ron, for tuning in. Order up his book, We Believe, Membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, A Christian Conversation. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.